Hi, my name's Jon Ingold and I'm the narrative director at Inkle. We made 80 Days and Sorcery, and we're here at AdventureX talking about our upcoming game, Heaven's Vault. So Heaven's Vault is an open world-ish archaeological science fiction adventure game. The protagonist is called Aliyah El Azra, and she explores a curious space nebula with her robot sidekick, tracing lost artifacts, translating ancient inscriptions, and trying to discover the lost history of the place where she lives. It took a really long time to come up with what this game was going to be about. We knew we wanted to do something that was more graphical than games we'd done before. We knew we wanted to do something with a lot of exploration and a lot of dialogue and a lot of character in it, but it took us quite a while to really find the heart of the thing. And then one morning I woke up with this idea, space archaeologist, and I told it to Joe, and who's the other half of Inkle, Joe Humphrey, and he said, wait, isn't that just Stargate? And I said, yeah, it is just Stargate, but no one's done a game about it, so let's do a game about it. And that was kind of it, really. There was something in that concept that hooked us both, and I think it was the mixture of something which was like rich and interesting and new. No one's made a game about an archaeologist for a long, long time. But also that sense of adventure, and all of our games have been basically about having a sense of adventure and exploring things and going to places you wouldn't normally go. And we felt that this was a way to really combine all those things in one place and set it in space. Not so much in terms of the plot and story, but the structure of the game, the way that you play, the way you explore and talk to people and discover things. So the biggest influence is Jordan Mencher's game, The Last Express from '97, which is a 3D real-time, 2D art, rotoscoped, crazy adventure game. It's completely unlike any other adventure game I've ever played. The time never stops. And we loved a lot of the freedom and the reality that gave its setting. We loved the personality of it. But it's a very, very hard game, and it's full of fail conditions, and it involves a lot of replay. So we wanted to try and take that structure but make it work and make it more accessible and more fun. So that was a big inspiration. Also the Blade Runner adventure game, which kind of was doing similar things in a slightly different way. That was a big inspiration too. In terms of the story, though, actually we were more inspired by a real archaeologist, a lady called Dr. Monica Hanna, who works protecting antiquities from looting in Egypt. And I read about her just in a couple of news articles and thought, wow, this is really interesting. Archaeology could be politically relevant. I hadn't had that thought before, and that really inspired a lot of what's in the plot. I mean, the plot is a science fiction story now, ultimately. Like, it definitely not a serious political treatise of any kind, but it has that at its heart. We've been on quite a long journey getting the engine to work and working out how the visuals are going to work. So it is a 3D world, and then the characters themselves are 2D because we like the expressiveness and the emotion of 2D art, and which you can't really get in a 3D model of a person. Even the very, very high-end stuff really struggles to capture emotion that a hand drawing can do very easily. So we're mixing 2D and 3D styles. That said, a lot of that work's been done by my co-founder Joe, who has worked at Rare for 4 years, worked at Sony for 2 years, has a lot of experience of 3D games and 3D engines and work. In fact, the work we've done previously on text games has been quite different, actually, than the sort of work that he's done before. So in some senses, it's been going back to something that we already knew. In other senses, yeah, it's been really, really, really hard. 3D games are really hard to make, and they're really hard to make look really polished and really slick, and like everything fits together well. So we're still working on that, to be honest, but we're pretty happy with how it's looking. We've also hired some wonderful, wonderful artists, which is really nice. So the studio has grown quite a lot, and that's been a pleasure. So the gameplay is built around 3 core things, really. One of them is exploring the 3D world, so that's exploring space in your ship, but also exploring locations and finding things and discovering things. There's a lot of dialogue and characters and talking to people. We're using the same engine as we used in 80 Days and Sorcery, which remembers every single choice you ever make ever and allows for incredibly adaptive, incredibly responsive fiction. So the characters will all respond to you and have opinions of you and remember what you're doing for the whole game. They are definitely not static robots. So that's a core part of it. And then the third part is translating an ancient language that you find on inscriptions. And that's a sort of puzzle game. It's a little bit like The Witness in some ways, but there's a lot of intuitive work as you try to deduce what old messages were. So kind of mixing those three things up together. So it's sort of a detective puzzle game with a kind of plot on top. But I think it's really its own thing, actually. We're pretty excited about how it's going to turn out. We're hoping about 9 months from here. One of the nice things about being an independent studio is we can be quite flexible about our times, so we can take as long as we need to get it right, and I think that's really important to us. Like, there's no point releasing a game that isn't quite what you want it to be, because you only get one shot. But yeah, it should be about 9 months, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. It depends really when we stop polishing it and decide it's good enough, this will do, people will get it. So translating our games is one thing that we've not managed to solve. We didn't manage to solve it for 80 days, which is about 650,000 words of text. It's slightly shorter than A Song of Ice and Fire, it's longer than The Lord of the Rings, and it's all branching and it's all dynamic. So translating that well is an incredibly difficult problem, and we just haven't even begun to approach it as a problem. It's also kind of not what we want to do. We want to make new games, not revisit the old ones. So we never found a way to do that, and I think for a while we were building Heaven's Vault in a way that would allow us to do a translation. But as it grows and it becomes more complicated, we have to make a choice between whether we want to tell a more interesting story or we want to make translation easy to do, and the story has to come first. So I'm really sorry to all the German players out there, and thank you if you have played any of our games and you do want to play Heaven's Vault. Thank you very much for your efforts. They're really appreciated. We are so sorry. Maybe. It depends if we have an idea, really. Like the first update to 80 Days came because we always wanted to add the North Pole, but we didn't have time on the first release, and so we did it for Christmas because we thought it would be fun. The second update for 80 Days coincided with our Steam port, but it was really because we had a couple of sections in America where we hadn't written any content and there was a hole that was nagging at us. There is still a hole in the 80 Days globe. We haven't got very much in China. China's a really big place. You can only go to one Chinese city. That's not... well, maybe two. Anyway, it's not enough. But it depends if we think of any stories. If they're lovely characters, we love that world, so maybe we'll go back to it one day, but I can't promise anything right now. My history is I started in the industry writing independent text adventure games when I was a student and got into 3D console development that way, which is not a very good route. And I've always been interested in text, I've always been interested in writing, so working on Sorcery in 80 Days was really exciting for me, and creating interactive prose that people could really get behind. It was also financially a very smart thing to do for a small new company, because we could generate it quickly and we didn't need to hire people, we could just make it. Like, we could just sit down and make it straight away. This game, moving something more graphical, is definitely more ambitious. We need more people, we need more skills, we need more vision for what it's all going to be like. There's still a lot of text in it, there's a lot of dialogue at its heart. Though a lot of that is in the branching and the variety of ways that situations can go. So we like to think that we're just expanding rather than giving up on anything. The reality is that the writing process is very, very different. But that's okay, that's natural, that's part of it. It's a bit like going from writing novels to going to writing a theatre stage play or something like that. Like, the writing is still crucial, but it's got a lot of other skills there as well now. Well, right now we really have to just get on and make this game. It's huge and big and complicated, and it's been a long time already, so we have to get it finished. But there are definitely plans for what we'll do next. We've got a bunch of ideas we're interested in. We tend to prototype things all the time, so we're always trying out new ideas in the office, and we have lots and lots of little hacky things sort of sitting on computers that we show each other. So we'll have to see which one grabs our fancy when the time comes and what we take forward. But I think we'll see a few more games from Inkle yet. thanks for paying attention. Thanks for watching what we do. It's an incredible thing for me that I'm working in this field, writing games based on text. No one, 10 years ago, everyone would have said that was a completely crazy thing to do with your life, and here I am doing it, and I feel really lucky and special for that. And I know Joe is incredibly happy to be running his own studio. Like, working as a programmer for a big studio can be a pretty hard thing. They really pigeonhole you into quite a small tranche. So we're both just overwhelmed with how lucky we are to be doing something that we love, and so thank you very much.